Hi there. In our previous tutorial, we saw that how can we deploy our Node.js application or the MERN stack application to the VPS server. In this tutorial, we are going to see that how can we configure our Node.js application to the HTTP web server instead of the weird port number like 3000, 4000. The HTTP web server will have many advantages, and one of the feature is that we will run our application on the port 80 or 443, which is the HTTP or HTTPS protocol, and we will reverse our proxy so that our Node.js run any port number that will be redirect to the HTTP port, that means 80 or 443. So let's see how can we do that. So this is my MERN stack application, which we already saw in our previous tutorial, and I am already logged in with my VPS server. Now let's at first we have to install our Apache web server, and then we have to configure. Actually, let's go to the steps. Now we can see at first we have to install the Apache server, then we enable our proxy and reverse proxy. Actually these two is mandatory, and we then create our another virtual server that will redirect any request to the HTTP port, and then we will reverse proxy our code from any location to the our backend and frontend folder. Backend and frontend port. So let's see one by one. So at first I have to go to my server. Now at first I have to install our Apache. So let's see. It is a Ubuntu server, so most of the time Apache web server may be installed. So let's check our service Apache web server daemon is running or not. So sudo system Apache 2. I can see I have no Apache services running, so that means my Apache server is not installed. So let's install our Apache server. Now let's check our Apache server is running or not. Now I can see our Apache server is running, and also it is enabled. That means when our server boots, it will automatically enable. If you don't have enable, then you can enable like this way. Just use the enable keyword and that will be enabled automatically. So let's check out one more time. I can see now our HTTP server is running. So if I go to in our previous tutorial, we saw that our MERN stack application was deployed on this server's port 80. But if I, instead of 80, if I type 3000, if I type 80, I can see my Apache server. But all we need that instead of 80 this space, we will redirect our this port to the Apache server, so that when we type 80 or IP address or our domain name, that will be serve our node application. So for that, let's go to our web server, and at first I have to enable our reverse proxy module. For that, I can see that I have to enable proxy, HTTP proxy, and rewrite and headers. So let's install the enable those services. So for that I need sudo permission. So sudo enable Apache 2 enable mode, it will be proxy proxy, then proxy http and http2 both has. So I am only using the http because I don't have http2 protocol running yet. So let's now we rewrite protocol and headers, and also expires. Now I can see it says that it is enabled. Now all I have to create a virtual host instead of our default one. So let's create one. Sudo vim. I am using the vim text editor. You can choose any text editor you prefer, like Nano. I am using the vim. So my location is etc Apache 2, and then sites, it will be site available. And if I go to, I can see I have default one, but we disable the default one. Let's create someone anything new. So that one will be our domain name. So let's if I go to my client, I do not have a domain name. So how can we solve our domain name problem? So for that, let's assume we have a domain name. So for that, vim etc host files, and here I can see I have some domain name. We can use a demo domain name here, and then if you have real domain name, you do not have to push it there. And in our another tutorial, we will cover that how can we create our domain name server, but for now I am using the fake domain name, so that it will only will be available for this client. So my domain name will be like, here I am giving an example, yourdomainname.com.com. so my domain name will be my IP address. What was my IP address? Port 80. So 192.168.0.80. If I type 192.168.0.80, it will be redirect your domain name.com like this way. So now if I ping 192.168.0.80, I can see I can access my server. But if I, instead of IP address, I can use my domain name. That means your domain name.com. I can see I can access my domain name via domain name. So I will use this domain name. That means your domain name.com. So let's go to here. Now I have to put my domain name, your domain name.com, and then this file has a .config extension. So if you saw, like, as you can see, all the VPS server, all the virtual server has a .conf extension. So I have to .conf means configuration, and I have to write this code. Actually I can copy paste. Let's copy paste instead of typing, and I will explain little bit later. Now as you can see, any request come to this host, it will be redirected to port 80 and my domain name. My domain name, what was my domain name? My domain name was, I forgot my domain name. Your domain name.com. It will be your domain name.com. Actually this same name, and it has the www extension, and my front end is running port 3000. That is no need to change, and it will be redirected to port 3000. Okay, everything is set up. So you can copy paste this same code as you like. I will provide that in my description. So let's go to the next step. Now I have new domain, new virtual server. So I have to disable my previous one, or default one, so that that will be not available anymore. So if it will be sudo disable this Apache to this site. It will be my 0 domain name, and I have to enable my new created one. So it will be sudo Apache to enable site. It will be your domain name.com. Now I have to restart my Apache server. So reload Apache 2. Now if I refresh my page, I can see instead of my Ubuntu server, it is running my Node.js application that is running my previous, I configured previous tutorial that how can we deploy a Node.js application to the VPS server. Now I can see I have running in the port 80. So instead of port 80, I can also use my domain name, your domain name.com. Now I can see my server is running with the proper way. In next and in another tutorial, we will cover that how can we create our valid domain name system, domain name server in our VPS server. Actually, it is a completely different topic. It is not related to the my web deployment category. So that is the reason I did not cover here. So I can see my VPS server is configured properly for the HTTP request. So let's see in our next tutorial.